What's up, y'all? This is the FemFuture Podcast where you, me, and the audience listening gets the opportunity to learn from amazing women curating a better future for themselves and others. I'm your host, Amber Latrice, and today I am joined by an amazing health coach. She is a TEDx speaker. She is a businesswoman. She is an advocate for women's health and natural restoration of women's balance in their hormonal space. I am joined by the amazing Miss Dinara. How are you doing today?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I always love the glowing introductions. You're like, yeah, that's me.
It is phenomenally. Oh my goodness. So we've had the opportunity to connect a little bit before the podcast. Before our audience members that don't know you, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So hi, all the listeners. I'm Dinara, and I am a women's health coach, and I focus on helping women within reproductive years, but also women that are transitioning into menopause to take control of their hormonal health and most importantly, find balance through understanding what the heck is going on in our bodies at any age. So we're able to support it in a way that makes us women thrive. And typically the women that I usually see, they come to me with things like painful or irregular periods, sometimes heavy irregular bleeds. I also see women with low energy, just women that are not getting good sleep. And I basically revive them and bring them back into life by getting them to understand their bodies and understand what role do hormones play. And by the end, they leave feeling befriending their bodies, because I think often they come to me just not understanding what the heck is going on and leaving me being like, I'm actually in control of my health.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I definitely can relate to that. So I'm excited to hear some of the things that we get into in the podcast. But before we get there, you've told us who you are right now. And I want to get an understanding for your younger self and who you were back in the day. Who was Dinara at age 21?
Oh, that's a great question. So who's Dinara at age 21? She was a young girl, and it's interesting because that's where my journey with health actually began. So Dinara at about 21 was a person that was going to university, and meanwhile, just like a lot of early 20-year-olds, trying to fit in and trying to understand where she belongs in the world. But in the meantime, her body felt like it was failing her a little bit. So she had extremely painful periods leading up, but not just the period itself, it's the week or 2 weeks leading up to it where she was feeling very moody and very emotional, and meanwhile trying to sort of keep her body in a way that kind of lived in accordance with the beauty standard and whatever the standard is. And I don't believe in it now, but back then believed that there is a certain beauty standard, and to support and to be able to fit into that mold, she was on top dieting excessive amounts. She was calorie counting. She was doing a lot of cardio, and she was struggling with very painful periods. At the time, she didn't know how all of this is going to get connected. But at that very time, she was a person who was just trying to fit in, excited about the future, yet not quite knowing what's going to happen ahead. So I think this is where probably I was, but it's good to reflect on it.
Wow. And I think the vast majority of us can relate to the concept of the body image piece, and a lot of times what we'll do to try and manipulate our own image to fit what we believe that society has set as the standard. So I'm really interested to learn how you got from where you were then to where you are now. You were facing all of these different issues with your hormones and your period at that time, and these body image, specific body image views. How did you get from there to where you are now, empowering other women that might be experiencing the same thing?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think my journey could be very similar to the women that to our listeners and to people that are going through any transition from 20 to 30s and into 40s. And I think the important part to recognize before I'll get into my story is that as women, we're very cyclical, and we go through, just like our menstrual cycle comes once a month, and we sort of go through this hormonal fluctuations, ebb and flow that happens on a monthly basis. The same happens with us when we go in our 20s, and then as we go in our 30s, our bodies change. And I think one of the things that as women, if we could only understand, is that we're not meant to be the same. And I think as I've transitioned into my 30s and trying to kind of remain in this 20-year-old body where it's just not realistic. Our bodies were not built that way. And I think once we realize that we naturally cyclically go through change, I think that's what helped me. And this is what I'm kind of the message that I'm hoping to deliver to women, that be kind with yourself, as opposed to, as you said, molding yourself into this image. Because when we even think about the idea of a beauty standard, like, what is the standard beautiful woman? Like, it's just like, what is that? Like, who said? And it's just the most, whoever you are, whatever woman you are the beauty standard. And I think that's the message that I wish we've been taught, as opposed to trying to fit into things. Because I think so many of us struggle with body images in our early 20s, and we take it with us for many, many years, as opposed to just snapping out of it and realizing that our body's just not meant to be that way. And yeah, and as far as my journey, so I'll kind of start with a pivotal moment. In my early 20s, I used to have, as I mentioned, really painful periods, but this one period in particular kind of set it all off. And I woke up with an extreme amount of pain, and I was living at my parents' house at the time, and my mom was like, it seems like you lost all blood from your face. Like, I looked that shade of blue, and it's not a healthy kind. And she's like, is something going on? And I'm like, no, my stomach really hurts. I think maybe my appendix has ruptured. So we immediately called an ambulance. They've arrived, they've inspected me. Was fully expecting to be packed up and taken to the hospital, but they're like, no, it's just a period pain. And I think just hearing the fact that it was just the period pain, and then they sort of proceeded to say, don't worry about it, this is normal. If this is something you're struggling with for a day or two, some women, it can take them out for a week. And I was like, all right. And at that point, sort of quite impressionable, counting my lucky stars that I don't have to struggle with the excruciating pain for a month, for a week. And I was like, well, okay, thank you. What can I do? And at that point, they've just given some medications, and off sort of I went. And after ended up going to the doctors, and the first thing that I've been prescribed is birth control. And birth control is the sort of the way that birth control works. It suppresses our natural hormonal fluctuations to prevent us from ovulating. And often it's prescribed by the doctor to sort of minimize the hormonal fluctuations, making the periods a little bit more predictable. And it certainly works for some women. It didn't work for me, and it created a lot of side effects. And I've started to gain even more weight, eating less. But then I've also developed the symptoms of depression, anxiety, just the sense of not feeling like myself in my own body. This is when I was like, I gotta quit this. So I ended up stopping the birth control pill, and at which point I was like, well, I gotta have to find a way. And this is what brought me into the work that I do today, after trial and error. But yeah, actually understanding what's happening with my body, and not taking in the pills to shut down the system, and also not making being a woman a diagnosis. Like, if you're a woman, you're just meant to be in pain. Like, I just think so many of us believe that, and I just think it's a lie. And once we know how to read our body, we can prevent the pain and discomfort.
Wow. Let's not make being a woman a diagnosis.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Can you say more about that? I feel like there's more there.
Yeah, well, I think, like, women, because the period pain is such a normal part of society, like specifically, we make joke about PMS, like we abbreviate to things, please meet Satan, or like other things. So we kind of like, we make fun of that particular part of our life, that for many of us, it's like, it's a week plus like 4 or 5 days of our period. So it's almost like a half a month where we just sort of, or if a woman is a bit moody, we immediately like, oh, she must be menstruating. So there is a lot of that humor that's attached to it, when in reality the women are the one that live it. And I know that I didn't enjoy feeling PMSy, but yet I didn't feel for a long time that I had a choice, because so many, like my grandparents, my grandma would tell me, yeah, that's what happens. My mom would tell me. So I kind of just believed that painful periods run in our family, like it was like blue eyes or blonde hair or something. Like it's just sort of like it doesn't run in your family. It happens because of very clear physiological response of your body to your environment, and once you understand and heal that, the pain just vanishes. But so many of us, we never in school, like if we think about sex ed, the things that we usually taught, like I remember having like an always pad and just putting the water and then cutting it and having that blue gel come out of it. I don't know if you remember that from sex ed. Or we had things like a cucumber and a condom, but there wasn't any education as far as what's actually happening in our bodies, and nor there was education there of impact of the nutrition of our lifestyle. So as women, we come out school or of institution, going to the world, not really knowing that our body goes through this incredible process on a monthly basis. The only thing that we know is when period comes, you got to take the pill to shut down the pain, fight through it, get to the other side, sort of thing. When I guess God's creator, whoever you believe in, didn't design 50% of the world to be in pain. So it's not right. And I just think we just haven't quite and I think that's, and it's kind of with a lot of things, it's the lack of education and understanding is what stops many women from even seeking the answers, because the society was like, yeah, this is just the norm. And hopefully this will be, if this is the first time you're hearing the fact that periods actually are not meant to be painful, or maybe you've entertained that idea, maybe you're someone that's struggling with painful periods, just know that there are solutions apart from medications.
Yes, listen, my periods take me out. Just full disclosure, I become like, I pop Advil like they're candy. So let's get into it. How did you go from, okay, I have this issue with the period, the pain was so bad, I thought my appendix was going to burst, to being on birth control and experiencing all of the side effects, which I've heard from actually a lot of women, to discovering that there's another option? Like, what was that path like?
You know, it was actually a phone call, which is really interesting, because it was in by that time I was late 20s, maybe even 30 at the time. And I was having a conversation with a friend over the phone, and she was sort of asking me, like, I'm like, yeah, I can't lose weight. Like, all I do is just, I feel like I'm barely eating. I'm doing excessive amount of cardio and HIIT, and I'm like so annoyed. Periods are painful. And then she's like, oh, whoa, like periods are painful? Did you know that periods aren't meant to be painful? Which is kind of like, that's the first person that told me that. And I was like, yeah, whoa, like what? Like I thought it was just a part of life. 12 years. Like, what are you talking about? She's like, yeah. And then that's when I came across the concept called cycle syncing. And for those that don't know what cycle syncing is, so as a women, we have our regular sleeping and waking cycles. Like, we've got the sun come up, we know that we have to wake up, sun goes down, we know it's night, and we got to go to bed. So we've got this rhythm, otherwise known as circadian rhythm. And as we wake up with it, go to bed with it. As women, we have this whole other rhythm that we have never been necessarily talked or introduced to, and that's called the infradian rhythm. And the infradian rhythm is the rhythm of our menstrual cycle, and it's the rhythm, it's like our second clock that kicks in at the time of puberty and takes us all the way out through to menopause. And it's like this 28-ish day clock, depending on the length of your menstrual cycle, but anything between 25 to 35 days is considered to be normal. Women's cycles vary, and it's not abnormal. But I'll refer to it as a 28-day cycle just for the simplicity of sort of explaining it. So the 28-day cycle, yeah, we kind of have this clock, like tick, 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 ticks every 28 days. And during this 28 days, your menstrual cycle clock is you have your period, and as your period ends, you begin sort of the rebirth of the new hormones. And as the hormones slowly begin to rise, and then they ebb and flow throughout the entire cycle. They go up, they come down, they go up, they come down. And there's actually 4 distinct phases that we have within our menstrual cycle. And the beauty of it is they reflect the seasons of nature, which is why we call nature Mother Nature. It's very cyclical, it's got 4 seasons, it changes, and we kind of operate just like that. So when we look at it from the lens of the sort of the weather, when we think of our period, that's our inner winter. That's the time when our hormones are quite low. We don't particularly want to go outside. We need the time to retrieve. And this is when we kind of go a bit inwards. As our period ends, we go into the next phase called the follicular phase. And the follicular phase is kind of like our inner spring. And I think women would notice that difference. I don't know if you notice that as well, Amber, whenever you come out of your period and you're like, oh, yeah, kind of
finally freedom.
Yeah, kind of coming out of the woodwork, and like the flowers are blushing and you're like, oh, everything is amazing. But what really happens is we've got these hormones that are rising, and as they begin to rise, our mood increases, our appetite changes, our energy goes up, and then we get to our ovulation, which is the pregnancy fertility window for women when they get pregnant. And the ovulation is known as our inner summer. In Chinese medicine, they also call it our hot season. So in order to kind of cool it down, we would want to usually recommend eating nutrition that kind of cool your body down, like berries and more fresh stuff. There is point in your cycle where you're like, I just kind of like want to eat really fresh foods. And this is usually coincides with ovulation. And as we go past our ovulation, past our inner summer, we're going to inner fall or inner autumn, depending where you're listening from, that called a luteal phase. And this is the point from ovulation that takes us all the way to our period. And during this inner fall time, this is usually where women begin to experience a lot of PMS, a lot of discomfort. And the reason being is because a lot of hormones fluctuate and fall and kind of like primarily fall before 3-4 days before our period, which is for many women, they experience things like breakouts, water retention, breast tenderness, some experience nausea, a lot of women experience migraine. So all of those things happen because the hormones sort of drop and come up again. For many women, when the period comes, they either feel the relief or they feel pain until sort of the next phase comes again. And that's how we go through 4 seasons on and on. And when I've discovered it, what else I learned is that those hormonal ebb and flow and fluctuations require different foods, require different movement, require different lifestyle. There are times in your cycle where you feel very outgoing, like when your period is done, you're like, woohoo, let's take on the world, let's go. And then when your period comes, you're like, no, close the door, close the blinds, I don't want to see anybody. So we change from the personality standpoint.
Exactly.
Yeah, then we need different foods as well in order to support the fluctuations. And then there are times where you can crush a workout, and there are times when you're like, absolutely not. And there's no way you're going to the gym or doing anything. So once you understand how to work with it, it actually works in an incredibly predictable cycle. And once you understand how your body works, you can plan your entire life with it. And once you do that, within 2-3 months, my period pain has vanished. My clients usually experience huge relief. So you can slowly change your body chemistry, quite literally, by supporting it in the proper way. I don't know if that was a bit overwhelming, but let's dig into it if you have questions.
Yes. Wow. That's amazing. That's amazing. So you went from this place where you were having the pain, you talked to your friend, and you gained all of this knowledge about period pain and the cyclical processes that we go through.
Yeah.
How did you go from, okay, I have this knowledge, to I'm going to take this knowledge that I have and empower other women that are experiencing something similar?
Yeah, but I think that's really interesting because so you said you experienced period pain. How long does it take you out for?
Generally like 5 days.
Yeah, quite a bit. So when I told you like the periods aren't meant to be painful, what do you think about it?
I felt the same way that you previously stated. Like, other people in the family have painful periods. It is what it is. It it is essentially like my cross to bear. It is like I've been dealing with this since my period started. I remember when I was younger, I would miss days of school because of the amount of pain that I was in. Since then, I've learned to kind of pay attention to some of the cues, because my period is also irregular. Pay attention to some of the cues that, okay, it's about to pop up. And I start taking medicine in advance to like try and counteract
not feel it
as much as I can. Yeah.
Terrified of the pain. And that's exactly the answers that I was hearing from women. And they're like, no, but this is, and I was like, they don't know what I know. It's like, you know, when you learn something and you're like, I gotta call them and gotta tell them. And it's just,
yes.
And this is literally what happened.
Oh my goodness. Following this podcast, I have a number of text messages I'm going to send out.
Yeah, exactly. And you're like, what? And you kind of like, you just discovered the secret to the universe that this is not meant to happen. Just like you said, we miss days to productivity. We don't go to school. We miss work. Like, and it's kind of, that shouldn't happen. It's just that's what I'm like. It's not, if we want to take a day off, that's all right. But if we don't go because our bodies are failing us, that means body's telling us like it wants to be in homeostasis, and it's homeostasis, and it's just telling you like, yo, pay attention because something is off. So that was my experience. I was talking to women and they were like, what? No, like this is impossible. And that's when I was like, I've always loved health and wellness. This was just the missing puzzle to women's health that I didn't quite know. And once that came, I was like, this is exactly what I'm going to do. And that's when I decided to start my business. And I sort of went online, started it on Instagram, started to build community. And then shortly after, I was like, I need a bigger stage. And I've always wanted to do TED, but I thought I would do TED when I'm like one of the TED Talks when I'll be like 50 and super wise. But then happened much sooner. I got wiser much quicker. Who would have thought? And that's what sort of brought me to TED, because I wanted to continue sharing this message with more and more women, just to bring that awareness. And in my TED, I actually break down the same information and what you should be eating. So as women begin to apply this, they will see a lot of relief.
Amazing. So what advice would you have for a woman that's in a similar situation? Maybe it's not the same subject, but they've come into the space where they have gained this knowledge or this revelation in an area, and they know that there's external application for it. What advice would you have for them in terms of taking what they know, what they've learned, what they've discovered, and creating something formal with it?
Yeah, as in like, if they discover this information, how do they go ahead and apply it? Was that
exactly? Or create it into a business, begin to speak, begin to educate. What advice would you have for women as it relates to going through that space of transition?
Yeah. So if for those women that are just learning this information for the first time and they're learning to implement it in order to support their own health, I would recommend starting small and just being kind of kind to yourself. And the way that you would implement cycle syncing is you would implement sort of one by one. You'd start with one food that you implement. Maybe like, for example, let's say in your menstrual phase, this is the time when we lose blood and we lose minerals. So we need things like the best minerals place is seafood or steak. So if you would be adding a little bit of that. Then as you go into your follicular and ovulatory phases, this is the time when you'd be eating lighter salads. Then as you go into luteal phase, it's the times where you would have to have things like sweet potatoes and wild rice, because closer to your period, your metabolism speeds up. So you need stuff that takes a little bit longer to burn as you take it in. So the way to sort of implement it and make it part of your life, I would recommend doing one thing at a time. And also, just even before you do that, if you're just somebody that gets your periods or just gets your cycle and you know that something is off, I would start tracking it, whether using an application. And there's a variety of them. There's FlowLiving, there's Clue, where you can just input your periods and it'll create a bit of prediction as to what's happening. And then as you go deeper with this work, you can bring it into your business, and you will know by tracking it, you will kind of realize this is the time where I have a lot of energy. So maybe this is the time where I should schedule, I don't know, seeing my in-laws, going on dates, doing, creating, recording podcasts, anything that requires me to talk. And then there's time where you're a bit more internal and you prefer to be on your own and do things like deep work, scheduling, maybe it's editing a podcast or things that just requires you to be on your own. There are times in your cycle where you're more primed to do certain things than others, but I think it does begin from awareness, and awareness starts with, for me, it started with a pen and paper. I just kind of started to write down every day how my energy changed. And then I began to notice pattern. And then when you bring that knowledge, you can kind of replicate it, which I think was,
Wow.
yeah, which I think is quite neat to do. And it's such a simple thing, but you're just going deeper into getting to know yourself, which is amazing.
That is. So you have gone from the space of experiencing the pain to gaining the knowledge to creating a space to empower women with the knowledge that you have. What do you feel, or what do you think your 21-year-old self would say to you in this moment? How do you think your 21-year-old self would react if she could see you in this very moment right now?
I think she'd be relieved that we no longer have the pain, and she would just be very, very excited that we got to a solution. I also think she'd be very, it kind of will give her that peace of mind about the fact that everything she's going through right now is perhaps adding and is going to become part of the story down the road, which I think is really interesting, because that story with when I called in an ambulance, it was one of those bleep in this history, but now it's become, it's such a great moment for me to reflect on, just to see how far I've come. I think she would just be very proud about the fact that I was able to take the pain and make so much more out of it, which I think we all wish sometimes, to just have a story and be able to share, but then also impact other people's lives. I think that's where the magic really lies.
Absolutely. And if she was in front of you right now, what would you say to her? How would you encourage her?
I do believe that we all have three people at the same time, at all time, living inside of us. And I do communicate with them a lot. And that's your past self, your current self, which is where I am right now, and then my future self. And I do like to integrate three of them and kind of understand, but mostly because building relationship with my past self allows me to build relationship with my future self, because it's sort of bi-directional. And if she's standing in front of me, I would just say, keep going. You're doing amazing, because I've had this, when I do my little exercises, talking to my three selves as we do.
Yes.
I would tell her that, well done, just keep going, trust yourself, keep at it. The answers will come, but sort of trusting, kind of coming back to trusting the process and knowing that everything that you're going through is leading towards something.
Wow. That's amazing. So we talked about what you would say to your younger self. On the flip side, if you could have a conversation with your 100-year-old self, the concept of your future self living within is a perfect transition. If you could have a conversation with your 100-year-old self, what do you hope she'd tell you about the life you live?
I hope she'd tell me the same thing that I told my 21 years old self.
Ooh,
and that's,
I love it.
Yeah, and that's just trust yourself, keep going, because you know yourself best, and you know where you want to get to. And sometimes the answers in front of you might not be as clear, but the purpose of you being on this earth is to grow and evolve. And if you continue putting yourself in more and more situations where it stretches you to grow, then you're fulfilling your purpose in life. Because I don't think there is necessarily, like for me, as far as purpose in life, as far as the direction, it's not so much one thing or a monetary goal. It's a lot for me about personal growth and evolution. And one of my biggest values is learning. And to me, it's really important to just continuously add to it. And as I learn and get to know myself better, I'm able to project it or invite other people on the journey, and hopefully contribute my little part to somebody else's lives, which is the dream. And that's, to me, I believe, how you live a wholesome life.
Oh man, I love it. I love it. I love it. You've taken us through so much and I can already tell you've impacted lives. You've impacted mine. I'm like, what? My period does not have to be painful. I do not have to be out of commission. So you've already impacted mine, and I know you're going to impact many others. But as we close, do you have any final advice for me or any other viewer that's working to intentionally curate our future?
So I think leaning into your feminine more, and because I think like in all of us, and this is sort of to take it to a next level, we all have different energies that run through us, and there's probably your audience familiar with feminine energy and masculine energy. And I think masculine energy traits are being very much rewarded in a society. Things like achievements, goals, go after things, fight for it. Like these are very masculine traits. But I think the beauty of a female trait is actually because they're not as rewarded, they're a little bit more, to me, it's kind of like that silent confidence and actually embracing more of the feminine energy and leaning into your femininity. And one of the best ways I know to do that is by working with your cycle, because this is one of the most feminine traits that you'll have, like respecting the fact that it's not about managing your time, it's about managing your energy. And this can never be more true. But for us women, there are times in our cycle where we're so much more primed to be in our masculine energy, and there are times when we kind of need to pull back. And I think in the world of kind of biology, one of the best examples is whenever an egg gets fertilized, like if you think about egg and a sperm, and whenever his egg gets fertilized and there's this millions of sperm flying towards it, egg is just sits there. She literally just like sits, and she just has the inner knowing that she will know who the right sperm is, and then catches it. And when she knows who the right one is, she opens up a little bit when the sperm comes in, and then the fertilization happens and the life happens. But the point of it is that the sperm is the one that fights for it. It's just like me, just fighting, punching each other's in the gut. But the egg is like, no, like she just chill. She's like, no, that one. And she's the one. And I think that's, to me, the epitome of feminine energy. So I think the advice that I can give to women who are trying to create themselves is trust yourself and just leaning into the feminine and bring it out by dancing, accepting compliments, however that might look for you, because I think that's where you will truly start to get in touch with your power.
Oh man, this has been so amazing. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. For people that want to dive in more in terms of hormonal balance, or simply want to reach out to you and have a conversation, can you tell the people where they can find you?
Definitely. And I'd love to hear from any of you if this conversation just resonated, just to tell me what even resonated. I would love to know. But you can find me on Instagram, and my name is Dinara, Dinara.mukh. And I'm the most active on Instagram. And if you also want to check out my TED Talk, it's called Menstrual Cycle is Your Superpower, which is what we discussed today. So should you want to dive in deeper and kind of know what I've spoken about, you'll be able to find it there. But the best place to connect with me is through Instagram.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and empowering us. And a very special thank you to the audience for tuning in. Until next time, let's continue to engage, support, and encourage each other as we work together to curate a femme future.